The Edmonton Oilers are set to take on the Florida Panthers in game number 6 tonight to try and keep their season alive. A whole lot to discuss. Let's get to work, Oiler fans.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On Oilers. My name is Nick Zararis. I'm your host. Thank you to everybody making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL general manager and managing your hockey franchise? Well, now you can with Ultimate Hockey GM. Completely free, and Locked On listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On NHL in the game store. To download the game, visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the Apple App Store or Google Play. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. Good episode for you guys today. First segment, we're going to tackle just how special Connor McDavid's playoff run at large has been. Got a lot of good stats for you guys to talk about. Second segment, we are going to tackle some of the more ambitious and risky decisions the Oilers have made over the last handful of seasons to put together the group that's got them this far in the Stanley Cup final. And then the last segment, we're going to talk about how Game 6 probably goes down. So, starting with everybody's favorite player, the one who may be the first player since Jean-Sébastien Giguère to win the Conn Smythe on the losing team in the Stanley Cup final, and that of course, is Connor McDavid. I struggle to describe how special what we are watching is. I more than once have thrown the Oilers on, hanging out with my friends, Friday night, Saturday night, too early to go out to the bar yet, and we're waiting. And I say, oh, the Oilers are on, let's watch. And my friends, most of them are casual hockey fans. Got a few friends who are big hockey guys, but even my casual hockey fan friends understand how special this is. Yesterday, I went to the movies to see Furiosa with two of my friends who are casual hockey fans. No, I shouldn't say that. One is a casual hockey fan. The other one is a hockey fan. And we were on the way to the movies. We were in the car. And the one who doesn't really watch hockey was like, so does he do that all the time? And he was talking about the McDavid pass to set up Corey Perry's power play goal. And I was like, yes, he does do that all the time. I showed him the goal he scored against the Rangers. I believe that was 2 years ago, where he bobbed and weaved through 4 defenders as well. I showed him one of the end-to-end goals where he went the length of the ice and bobbed and weaved through a bunch of people. The point is, this is a level of dynamic ability that we just don't see. And there are players who have raw skills, who can shoot maybe as well as McDavid or pass as well as McDavid. But those two, in conjunction with his hockey IQ and his positioning and his skating, he's truly, I don't want to say he's underrated, but it doesn't feel like we talk about enough how special he is. You heard me reiterate the quote Paul Maurice had after Game 5, where he said, we're all numb to how good McDavid and Draisaitl are. And to some degree, we are. He makes plays that normal people cannot. He makes plays that all-stars, superstars cannot. There is maybe one other player in the world who makes the play he makes to set up that Perry goal. And I don't think Nathan MacKinnon does it. I don't. McDavid's ability to make that play happen as fast as he does is what sets him apart. So I got some stats for you here on Connor McDavid's Stanley Cup final and playoff run. I'll clarify which is for what as we go along. He is the first player ever with back-to-back 4-point games in the Stanley Cup final. Someone had done 3 and 4. No one had ever done 4 and 4. He has the record for most points facing elimination in the Stanley Cup final with 8. He broke a record that was set in 1942. The last team to successfully come back from 3 games to none, the 1942 Toronto Maple Leafs, they had a player who had 7 points in that series facing elimination. McDavid got it to 8. He ties the record for most points when facing elimination in an entire playoff run. So that includes Game 6 and Game 7 against Vancouver, and then Game 4 and Game 5 of this series against Florida. Most points in a single Cup final by an active player. There are a few players who have had 10. The last player to have more than 11 in a Stanley Cup final. Danny Briere in 2010. The Flyers did go on to lose that series, but Danny Briere, the last player to have more than 11. Fourth most points ever in a single playoff run with 42. Obviously, when we talk about those types of stats, it's hard to compare that to the era that Gretzky played in, the era that Mario Lemieux played in, where the defense was a little bit lower quality. The goaltending technique and goaltending equipment was not as good. So a little more difficult to kind of calibrate just how McDavid's numbers would have translated back then, or Gretzky or Lemieux's translating to the present. So, seventh most assists in an entire year, meaning regular season and playoffs. We know McDavid, first player in forever to have 100 assists in the regular season. Kucherov did it as well in the regular season. But you add his playoff assists and his regular season assists, seventh most ever in a full season. The first six are all Wayne Gretzky. He passed Gretzky on one of them. Gretzky had one run where he had less than the amount of assists he currently has, but the only six people ahead of him. And then only player with 5 assists in a single playoff game. We are watching something, frankly, you will talk about the rest of your life, regardless of whether or not the Oilers go on to win the Stanley Cup. And if they go on to win the Stanley Cup, that will be this might be the most talked about playoff run ever. You know, this might be the single most talked about playoff run in the sport's history going forward if they are able to come back from a 3-0 deficit on the back of McDavid having one of the all-time great, if not the greatest playoff run of all time. Either way, you will talk about how Connor McDavid played on the way to Game 6, Game 7, or winning the Stanley Cup final for the rest of your life. This is not something you will forget, and this is not something you will move on from. If they win, this goes down. This is like the opening line of the Hall of Fame introduction video is Connor McDavid was the captain and the best player on the team that came back from 3-0 down against the Florida Panthers in the 2024 Stanley Cup final. That opens the Hall of Fame reel if they pull this off. If they don't pull this off and he just wins the Conn Smythe as a player on the losing team, that goes at the bottom of the Hall of Fame plaque where it lists the accolades. It'll say Hart, Art Ross. On there, we'll say Conn Smythe 2024. And then people at the Hall of Fame who are younger and don't know, they'll Google 2024 Stanley Cup final. They lost and he won the Conn Smythe. How good was he? That's the type of stuff we're talking about now. You know, we were talking last week when the great Jerry West passed away, the NBA player, Lakers, great executive, led so many different lives within the basketball world. One of the only players ever to win a finals or a championship round MVP on the losing team. That is a level of determination and dedication. And as my friends on Twitter like to say, y'all lost, not me. And in this case, Connor McDavid won't live with himself if the Oilers can pull off this series win. But he's got nothing to be ashamed of. And ultimately, and this is going to sound very moral victory-y, and I'm going to cancel that out by knocking on my desk because I do think the Oilers are going to win tonight. But if the Oilers don't win, Connor McDavid got nothing to feel bad about. The Oilers at large don't got a lot to feel bad about. Can they lament missed opportunities? Can they regret what could have been? Sure. But you gave your best effort. You dragged this series out. You made Florida earn it. At the end of the day, that's all I can ask for. If you tried your absolute best, there's nothing else you could have done. And ultimately, that's kind of how you have to live with it. So we're going to take a quick break. Be right back. We'll tackle some of the interesting risks and gambles Ken Holland has made in assembling this roster in what's his swan song. By all accounts, he's more likely than not going to leave the Oilers organization whenever the Stanley Cup final ends. So stick around. We'll talk about that a whole lot more. Hey, Locked On Oilers fans. I want to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing the Oilers? Do you think you could run the Oilers better than Ken Holland? Do you think you want the job once he leaves after the Stanley Cup final? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons and lead it to glory, hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, navigate free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As an Oiler fan, you know there's no offseason. We saw it on Wednesday. Darcy Kemper, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Barclay Goodrow, Jacob Markstrom. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you're going to love the game. I have it on my iPad. I've been having a little bit of fun improving the Oilers. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On Network listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in the game store. Make sure to check it out. To download the game, visit hockeygm.app on a web browser or look it up on the Apple App Store or Google Play. Ultimate Hockey GM. Start your dynasty today. I want to thank everybody making Locked On Oilers part of their Friday. I know, very much looking forward to the weekend. Got a busy one on deck, running errands, helping someone move. Got to travel a little bit, but it's the weekend. It's the summer. God willing, the Oilers are going to play a Game 7 early next week, and you're going to need the weekend to recharge and get mentally prepared for the anguish of a Stanley Cup final Game 7, which we haven't had in 5 years. But we got to get there. Got to win Game 6. We'll talk more about Game 6 in the next segment. So, right now, I want to talk to you guys about something we're not spending a lot of time talking about. When we're in a Cup final, typically we're game to game every other day, and we're in a nice rhythm, days off. But being that the travel is so long outside the norm, the NHL opted for extra built-in days when they're going from Florida to Edmonton and vice versa. So we have extra time. We can peel back the curtain. To go into the Shrek universe, we can peel back the layers of the onion. We can talk about how we get here. And a lot of people, I know there are a lot of people in Vancouver who are very upset the Oilers are here. There are a lot of people who were watching that Vancouver series who are Canucks fans saying, oh, well, even if the Oilers beat us, they're not going to beat Dallas. And the Oilers went on and beat Dallas. Oh, even if they get the Stanley Cup final, they're not going to beat Florida. Not dead yet. And because of that, I wanted to take a moment. I wanted to think in the aggregate. How did Edmonton get here? What was the driving force, if you will, of their evolution? How did they go from first or second round exit to 2 wins away from winning the Stanley Cup? And got a whole long way to go before we can talk about winning the Stanley Cup. But they are at a point where they're pretty close to the ceiling of what they can do. They don't have a lot of cap space to improve their roster. They're going to need to give Draisaitl and McDavid raises. Bouchard is going to need a long-term extension. We are at a point where the Oilers have to take risks in their roster construction. They cannot afford to play it safe because they need the high variance outcome. They have to account for, well, what's the best case scenario here? Because we can't afford the middle of the road. We need the best possible outcome. So what does that look like? And that starts, in my opinion, with the Mattias Ekholm trade. I know Zach Hyman is going to be a point of conversation in this topic, but he's coming. I promise. He's on my list. I got my notes over there on my other monitor. I promise we're going to talk about Zach Hyman. I think the single most constructive addition the Oilers have made during this window over the last handful of seasons was adding Mattias Ekholm, because that gave them a defensive defenseman who they felt comfortable enough to deploy with Evan Bouchard to give Evan Bouchard more run. And I think Bouchard and Ekholm's emergence as one of the preeminent defensive pairs in the entire NHL is the single most important component to the Oilers' improvement. Not that they weren't successful before, but going from Nurse and Tyson Barrie and Duncan Keith to Bouchard and Ekholm, who have a legitimate claim to maybe being the best defensive pair in the entire league, that is a transformational change. You get that type of improvement, you are going to get dramatically better results. Think about it. Your first defensive pair plays the most minutes out of everybody. Your first defensive pair is going to play close to 26, 27 minutes a game this time of year. They are going to have an outsized responsibility in your results, especially when you look at the Oilers' other 2 defensive pairs. You look at whatever permutation, Nurse, Ceci, Broberg, Desharnais, Kulak, whatever permutation you want to run of those other 5 defensemen. If Ekholm and Bouchard implode, the Oilers are screwed. There is no chance for the Oilers to win if Ekholm and Bouchard are not effective. You saw it. You saw the Oilers struggle in Game 3 because Bouchard had the bad game, had the turnover that led directly to the one Florida goal, and was on the ice for the other Florida goal against. If you're going to get there, you're going to need the defense to be perfect. And we're going to talk about the next segment, Game 6, and why the defense, probably Stuart Skinner, are going to have an outsized influence in Game 6, more so than Games 4 and 5. I don't want to rush myself. So, Ekholm, I think the most important addition. Then number 2, obviously, Zach Hyman. You don't just find 50-goal guys. There have not been a lot of 50-goal guys in the NHL over the last handful of seasons. I know we're in a scoring-friendly environment. I know we're in a world where guys are going to be able to score more often because there's more power play opportunities. There's more space. We're calling more penalties. I know I just repeated myself, but going through my mental list, sorry. With more offense, more chances to score, harder to play quality defense. Zach Hyman, on top of just scoring the goals, it's how he does it. And I talked about this going into the series against Florida, that one of the real advantages Florida has is their net front play. And the equalizers for Edmonton, Evander Kane, who's been injured and hasn't played particularly well in these playoffs because of his sports hernia, and Zach Hyman. And the thing about Hyman, everybody wants to make fun of him that's not an Oilers fan for just having tap-ins. You know how hard it is to get to that area of the net front? You know how rough it is as Zach Hyman to get to that space, the physical abuse you're going to take to occupy there to get there? And Zach Hyman was not this slam dunk addition. You think about his role in Toronto, and he has scored more goals in the 3 seasons as an Oiler than he had in the previous 6 years of his NHL career. You add up the first 6 versus the last 3 supersede those previous 6. And Hyman is an example of adding a player and having a vision for him. Too many teams go out there in free agency, they see a talented player, and they don't think, how does he fit? They see, he scores goals, he will score goals when he gets here. Not, why does he score goals? The Oilers saw Zach Hyman as an ancillary and auxiliary piece in Toronto, whether he was playing with Austin Matthews or playing with John Tavares. He was a supplementary piece. He would get pucks, he would be around the net front, and he would help contribute offensively that way. Now, he's riding shotgun with the best player in the world, who draws a lot of attention to himself, and it gives Hyman opportunities that he wouldn't have anywhere else. And then real quick, we got to get Chris Knoblauch in here. To change coaches in season, a popular coach in Jay Woodcroft that the players like, that very clearly wasn't the only reason the team wasn't playing well. Any coach would have struggled the way the Oilers played that first month of the season, but Knoblauch, unproven at the NHL level, had 2 games, I believe, of interim coach experience with the Rangers when David Quinn had COVID, like 3 or 4 years. Yeah, 2021. They did win those 2 games where he was the interim coach. They scored, I think, 10 goals against the Flyers in one of those games, but we're not taking that very seriously. That was a painfully unserious year for the NHL. After all, that's what got Darnell Nurse $9 million a year. I digress. Going to an unproven coach, yes, he's got the McDavid connection, but going to somebody who had never been an NHL coach before with the mandate of basically win the Stanley Cup and, oh yeah, I'm the general manager hiring you. I'm probably not going to be here. So if it doesn't go well, you're probably going to lose this job and you probably are going to have to go back to the AHL or be someone's assistant for a couple of years if you want a serious chance to ever be an NHL head coach again. You look at Dan Bylsma, it took him 7 years to get back to the NHL level as a head coach. It's not easy. And Dan Bylsma has a Stanley Cup. We're not talking about that with Knoblauch here. If it didn't work for him here in Edmonton, they miss the playoffs, they get bounced in round 1, and Ken Holland leaves. Well, a new general manager is going to want their own coach. It worked out. Chris Knoblauch, I don't want to say he won them the Canucks series, but he pushed all the right buttons in the Canucks series, going to Pickard for the 1 game, breaking up Nurse and Ceci, inserting Broberg for Desharnais, instrumental in the Oilers getting here. And those types of gambles, trading for the best defenseman at the deadline, signing somebody you think who can go from a 20-goal guy to a 40-goal guy, and then changing coaches because all your team needs is a shot in the arm to get going. That is calculated risk-taking. And yes, we would be having a different conversation if it didn't work out, but it did. It did work out, so you got to give the credit. We will be right back, tackle Game 6, set the table for the game tonight. Stick around. Be right back. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you to everybody listening to today's edition of Locked On Oilers, whether it's first thing in the morning, getting the table set for what's going to be a stressful day for Game 6, or end of the day on the way home, getting locked in. Thank you. So, you heard me talk about it yesterday. I'm going to reiterate it again. A low-scoring rock fight favors Florida. Up and down transition favors Edmonton. The two games Edmonton has won are the games where Florida is broken down structurally and had to play more individual defense as opposed to holistic team defense. When you make Kulikov or Ekman-Larsson or Montour or Mikkola defend as an individual, it will never be as effective as it was when it was 5-on-1. That's the key for Edmonton. Can they get Florida to break down? Can they move the puck? Can they get to offense quickly? Can they put heat on Bobrovsky? And I know there's a lot of conjecture going around right now. Have the Oilers solved Bobrovsky? I think the environment, the game environment has changed a little bit. More scoring chances, more rush opportunities. Those are usually more dangerous, though they're hard to sustain over the course of an entire game. A little more energy, you burn more energy going up and down. You break down defensively a little bit more going up and down. So I do think it's important to hone in on maximizing the opportunities you do get. That said, you compare the first three games, the games the Panthers won versus the last two, there's a discernible difference. The last two chances, up and down, power play, that's been essential. You know, getting the Connor Brown shorthanded goal, getting a power play goal from McDavid, getting a power play goal from Corey Perry. That's why they won game number 5. They need that advantage on special teams because if it's 5-on-5, it's really hard for the bottom 6. And I know the bottom 6 has contributed. You know, Janmark, Henrique, Perry, McLeod, those guys have contributed on this playoff run. But if the Oilers are going to win, more likely than not, it's going to come down to the McDavids, the Draisaitl's, the Hymans, the Bouchards, versus anybody I just mentioned who plays in the bottom 6. And that's not a knock. The Oilers' path is McDavid continuing to play out of his mind, putting pressure on the Florida's best players to match that. And if they can't, the Oilers win. If they do, the Oilers need to find ways to get McDavid away from them. We talked a little bit about the Barkov-McDavid head-to-head matchup and how it's been close. And then in the minutes McDavid's been away from Barkov, he's outscored the Panthers 3-1. That is good. We need that if the Oilers are going to win this game tonight. They're going to have the benefit of last change. They're going to be able to duck McDavid from Barkov a little bit to try and maximize his chances. We know Chris Knobloch loves to get Bouchard and Ekholm out there with McDavid to really tilt the ice and maximize McDavid's minutes. It's going to take a lot to win this game. Florida is going to start to feel that sense of desperation. Edmonton has played with real desperation the last 2 games, and it's been a driving, powerful force for them. Now Florida's going to feel some heat. Florida's not quite as desperate as Edmonton to stave off elimination. They don't want to play a game 7. Anything can happen in a game 7. You know, I think a lot about there's a 30 for 30 ESPN documentary about the Yankees Red Sox 2004 ALCS. The Red Sox in that series, they come back from 3-0 down. First team ever in baseball history to come back from 3-0 down and win the series in the playoffs. There's a scene where Kevin Millar, their first baseman, rotational player, not a star. I think he hit like 7th. Good player. He's talking with Dan Shaughnessy, the Boston Globe columnist, and he says, don't let us win tonight. And this is ahead of game 4 up in Boston. The Red Sox did win that game, I want to say like the 12th to 13th inning. David Ortiz home run off of Mariano Rivera, if I remember correctly. No, David Ortiz home run off of Paul Quantrill. He says, don't let us win tonight because we got Pedro Martinez game 5, Kurt Schilling game 6. Anything can happen in game 7. Right now, the Oilers, they won their game 4. They had Pedro Martinez win game 5. Now, it's unfortunate Curt Schilling is a bad person, so I can't really emphatically say, oh yeah, all they need is their Curt Schilling performance. But you got McDavid playing out of his mind right now. You get that one more game, then we're down to 1. Anything can happen in a game 7. All you got to do is win one game, and then all bets are off. Then it's kitchen sink, battle station, DEFCON 1, whatever you want to use to describe it. As intense and surreal as it gets in the sports world. Win one game, and you are on the brink of immortality. You win a game just to force the game 7. All of the pressure goes on to Florida. All of the pressure goes on to Florida. You win this game, you can do this. Win one more game. You heard me talk about it when they were down 3-0. It wasn't, can we win 4 straight? It was, can we win 1? Okay, we won 1. Can we win 2? We win 2. Okay. Oilers got to win 2 straight games. Oilers did that quite a few times in the regular season. Can they win 1? So they have the privilege of trying to win 2. That will just about do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. I want to thank everybody for listening. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, Apple or Spotify. If you are on Apple or Spotify, please be so kind. Leave the show a 5-star review. If you are watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell, get a notification whenever new content goes live. If you are watching over on YouTube, leave me a comment. Do you think even if the Oilers lose this series, which they're not, knocking on wood for you guys, do you think Connor McDavid still deserves to win the Conn Smythe? Let me know in the comments. I will talk to you guys after Game 6. Until then, let's go Oilers.